Thank you. Oh, no. Can anybody hear me in there?
Unmuted. Hi there, folks. Kath.
Good morning, everyone. Annabelle here.
Morning, Kath.
Morning.
Morning, Kath. We can hear you.
Right, thank you.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning. 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 Morning.
Morning, everyone. It's just gone 10 o'clock. Just ask at Alden House, are we ready to start, please? Nobody's talking to me.
Just waiting for Councillor Warmby, I think.
Thank you. Shall we just give him a couple of minutes and then we'll make a start then? Thank you.
Gil?
Do you like my halo, everybody? Oh, it's great that, Dave.
Oh, yeah.
It looks like you're on supercharged, Dave.
Hannah, are we actually online yet?
Yes, we are
So
live.
can you just remind members that we are being viewed by the public? Thank you.
Robert, can I just mention something? I do have to leave at 11:45. Sorry. So just so you know.
I think we're going to make a start, and then if Councillor Warmby does join us, he will have to fit in where's best. Welcome to this meeting, this additional meeting of the Planning Committee, Friday the 30th of October. We'll start by the roll call and apologies for absence. We've got Andrew Gregory, who may join us later on. Andrew Hart has sent his apologies, and Andrew McCloy has sent his apologies also. Declarations of interest. So when you do the roll call, if you give any declarations of interest, I can start by saying that I've had 2 emails in relation to item 6, one from Mr. Milinkovic and one from Mr. Thompson. If anybody's got anything in addition to those, please will they indicate. So over to Hannah to do the roll call. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So as the Chair said, if I can take a quick roll call and you can give me any declarations of interest, please. Councillor Armitage,
Aye. Declarations of interest.
Councillor Brady,
Yeah, no interests.
Councillor Chaplin,
Good morning. I've had the email from Mr. Milinkovic for item 6.
thank you. Councillor Chapman,
Present. I've had the same, excuse me, the same email from Mr. Milinkovic. I don't think this is really an interest, but I just have to point out that I have actually been onto the more for item. Which one is it? Sorry, item 6.
Item 6.
I have visited that with most of the future, but it didn't affect this this application at all.
okay, thank you. Ms. Harlan,
Present, no interests.
Mr. Councillor Huddlestone. You're muted, Councillor Huddlestone.
I am here. I'm
Thank
declaring
you.
interest in item 6. I've had the same emails, but I also sit on the local access forum for the Peak Park. So the interest I'm going to declare, I should leave the meeting and not vote.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs. Potter.
No interest to declare. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Richardson.
Present and no interest to declare.
Miss Slack.
Present and the same email for item 6 from Mr. Milinkovic.
Mr. Smith.
Present and the email from Mr. Milinkovic.
And Councillor Warmby. No, that's everybody, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. So we've no urgent business. Public participation. We have a list of speakers, which we will come to as we go through each item. Most of those are video presentations, although we do have one live telephone call for item 6. So moving on then to the first substantive item, which is the full application for the erection of 3 affordable local need dwellings on land off Hardy Lane at Tideswell. This is a site that the chair and vice chair visited yesterday just to see how the land lies, as it were. And over to John Keeley for further details, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and good morning, members. This is the application site on the screen at the moment. It lies within the confines of Tideswell Village at the junction of Sherwood Road, which runs north-south to the left of the slide there, and Hardy Lane running east-west. As the Chair said, the proposal is to erect 3 houses on the site for affordable local needs, 1 detached house and a pair of semis, along with 3 parking spaces. The site is surrounded by residential development, detached house to the north, terraces to the left, and in particular note, the house immediately south of the site, Hardy House, is a Grade 2 listed building, and the whole of the site and the immediate surroundings fall within the Tideswell Conservation Area. Could I have the next slide, please? One of the key features of the site, which is at present an open green space within the village, are 6 mature trees on the site, which are covered by a tree preservation order. There is also, below the trees near the front of the site, a small block of dilapidated prefab garages. The proposal, the slide in front of you now, if you look at the centre tree there, that is the one which is proposed to be removed as part of the scheme, and that's the lime tree, which I'll refer to more as we go through the slides. Can we have the next slide, please? So I think the next series of slides will show you the contribution these trees make to the conservation area and the street scene. And looking there, we're looking north up Sherwood Road. The main trees in the shot there are the 2 trees at the front of the site, and the access down Hardy Lane is just to the right of that red car at the end of the barn there. If we have the next slide, please. Just moving a little closer, You can see there's the entrance down Hardy Lane to the right-hand side, and you can see Stanley Croft, I should say, the detached house standing just to the north of the site between the trees. And the lime tree proposed to be removed is the one that's just intruding on the right-hand side of that slide now. Next slide, please. This is the looking down Hardy Lane and across the site. You can see the top of the prefab garages there. They aren't attractive, obviously, but they're set down. So although removal would be a small enhancement, currently they're not creating a great visual intrusion in the village street scene. And I understand they haven't been used for around 25 or 30 years. You can see also there the entrance gate there, that's the entrance into the site at present, would also form the entrance point for the proposed development. The wall between that gateway up to the lamppost, you'll see on the plans in a moment, would be removed because the detached house, the rear of the detached house would form the boundary hard up against Hardy Lane at that point. And you can also see to the right-hand side of the slide, the bollard, which restricts access further down Hardy Lane, essentially creating it a footpath. And that leads down to Fountain Square and the main road through the village. Next slide, please. This is standing on Sherwood Road, looking over the garages down the site. And you can see the fairly green roof by default on the garages from the debris falling from the trees. And to the right of the slide there, you can see Hardy House, the listed building. Next slide, please. And this is looking up Hardy Lane with the garages on the right-hand side. If we have the next slide, this slide then pans right to show you the garages and the Stanley Croft to the right-hand side. And if we have the next slide, please. This is taken from down the bottom of Hardy Lane, looking up. And you can see the main trees, the darker trees there are the 3 trees at the bottom of the site. Again, all covered by tree preservation order. And the wall to the right is the private wall garden to the house at the bottom of the site. If we go to the next slide. This is moving further up Hardy Lane, just a closer view, the junction between the neighbouring garden and the bottom of the site. And next slide, please. This is within the site, just to show you the character. If we have the next one as well. The next slide, panning left. And the next slide. And the next slide, please. And this is turning around from that point within the site, looking back down to the property below the site. And the next slide, please. So this is the proposed layout in a little bit more detail. The houses are coloured blue. Grey is the parking and circulation area, and green the curtilage proposed for the properties. One of the concerns in the set out in the report is the layout being quite cramped and not reflecting the character of the current street scene, where buildings are either located close to the street or slightly set back, and there isn't development in depth. And it also illustrates, this slide and the others following, how development of the house underneath the canopies of the trees and upon their root protection area is going to cause the harm that we're particularly concerned about. If we go to the next slide, please. This is an extract from the tree protection plan, and shows in the centre of the slide, in red there, the lime tree, which was misidentified in the tree report. That's proposed to be removed to make way for the development, but it is in fact a healthy tree with at least 40 years life left in it. You see there the sort of purpley, darker purple areas are the areas where the tree plan proposes that special protection measures be employed to protect the root protection areas, such as some form of cellular material which would protect the ground from compaction, and also identified areas where special foundations would be required to protect the root protection area, either piles or some form of screw foundations rather than strip foundations. If we have the next slide, please. This just shows the tree gone. So this is the elevation to Sherwood Road, showing the houses in situ. You can see there the darker gable end is the detached house, and the pair of semis further down the site sat behind it. And in context. And the next slide, please. This is the context looking north from Hardy Lane. So you've got the detached house on the left there, and the pair of semis gable end onto the lane on the right-hand side. Both of the elevations you see there would actually form the hard boundary to Hardy Lane. So you'd lose those sections of boundary wall, and those remaining sections would butt up against the buildings. And the next slide, please. And that just shows the same view in section with the Stanley Croft property beyond. And the next slide, please. In terms of the design of the houses, they take a very much traditional form, constructed in limestone with blue slate roofs, timber windows and doors, and a regular arrangement of fenestration to reflect the local tradition. This is the detached house, and this is the main elevation, which would face north. Next slide, please. And this is the rear elevation, which would front onto Hardy Lane. Next slide, please. And the gable end, this would what you would see looking down from Sherwood Road. So there's the boundary wall there to Hardy Lane. And the next slide. And this is the elevation looking up Hardy Lane. And the next slide. Layout is very conventional. Ground floor. And the upstairs plan, please. The next slide. 2 bedrooms. So the detached house is 2 bedroom, and the semis we'll look at in a moment are 3 bedrooms. And the next slide. This is the section that's been submitted. You can see here at the bottom of the slide the foundation design, which is the traditional strip foundations, which would clearly impact more severely upon the tree roots. And the next slide, please. This is the pair of semis, which would sit further down the site, and this is the front main elevation, which is looking up towards Sherwood Road. You can see here the difference between this and the detached house is that within this scheme there are rooms within the attic space, and therefore it has a steeper roof. And you can see on this slide the proportion of roof to wall is much greater, which is slightly out of keeping with the character of the local building tradition. And if you have the next slide, please. And the rear elevation, this is looking down the hill towards the adjoining dwelling and the main street. You can see the roof lights there to light the attic rooms. And because of the slope, the downstairs doors require steps up to them. You can see there. And the next slide, please. So this is the gable facing onto Hardy Lane. And the next slide is the other gable facing Stanley Croft. And this gable is much wider than the detached house because of the layout. This is 8.3 meters wide, which is significantly larger than traditional sort of cottage style dwellings within the parish and the local area. And the next slide, please. These just show the layout. You can see there the width of the house. And upstairs room on the next floor. Next slide, please. It's 2 bedroom, the first floor, and then the next slide will show each has an attic room. And the next slide, please. And this again, strip foundations. I think that is the last slide. Is that? So I've got a couple of updates before I give the final summary. Thought that one of the relates to the in fact we received quite late this week, along with that now so we can remove the wording.
Yeah, it's breaking up.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you now, John. Yeah, you might be best turning your
Can
camera
you hear me
off, I think.
now?
Yeah.
I think something ringing at the same time.
Yeah. Yes.
I'll carry on.
Might be
Mass
best turning
that
your
within
camera off, John,
reason
I think.
5.
John, is that
I
your
beg your
phone?
pardon, John. It's not my phone, no. Is that?
Okay.
It seems to have gone now, whatever it was. I'll
Right.
carry on.
I think you might need to turn off your camera, I think, John, because you're just breaking up a little bit.
That's what I
I'll
was
do that.
suggesting, yeah.
Sorry, John, I couldn't hear you. Okay. Right, so hopefully you can hear me better now. So I'm asking that within reason 5 for the refusal, removed where there's no protected species survey and the trees had low to moderate value for bats, and the surveys which were subsequently carried out identified that there weren't any bats using the building, but there were in fact bats roosting in the beech tree at the front of the site and within the lime tree, which is proposed to be removed. So it concluded that a license, a European Protected Species license, would be required to remove T3 and disturb the other tree, and that if we were to go to an approval, there would need to be a comprehensive mitigation strategy. No active birds' nests were found on the site, but the site did have high potential. So again, mitigation was proposed. The site was of low value for amphibians, so precautionary measures were proposed along with precautionary measures for hedgehogs. We also received the street elevations, which I put in the presentation. We haven't been able to get any feedback back from our own ecology team because of the lateness of the submission. And one of the members identified at the site visit yesterday that in paragraph 114 of the report, we'd left the word not in the sentence, which doesn't make sense. So if in paragraph 114, if you could omit the word not in the first sentence, so it reads the proposed development would therefore result in a layout that detracts from, etc. So in summary, whilst this is a site that lies within the main body of the village, and our policies would normally in principle allow for redevelopment, in practice, the very significant constraints posed by the protected trees makes development impossible without substantial loss of one and significant harm to the others. Furthermore, our view is that in attempting to accommodate the 3 houses and the parking areas on the site has resulted in a cramped layout which wouldn't adequately reflect the built form of the locality. And in addition to harming the trees, that form of development would impinge upon the setting of the adjacent listed house. And we would also ask that an additional clarification is put into the reasons to add harm to the setting of Hardy House, which was identified in the report but not carried through adequately in the reasons. So for those reasons, Chair, the recommendation is one of refusal. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Apologies to members for the difficult reception there for a while. We now move on to speakers, and we have one speaker for this, which is through video presentation. This is from Robert Hopkins. So over to Alden House, please.
I have lived close to this piece of land for all my life and know its history well. Until last year, a mechanic used the site to store vehicles and parts. He was issued with a cleaning up order as the site became overrun with dilapidated vehicles. The garages have never been available for anyone else. The site has been uncared for. The walls are falling down and some of the trees referred to in previous applications have already fallen and been removed. The rest have not been maintained even though permission for a crown lift was given but not carried out. Following an informal chat with Pete Park, we bought the land in March this year thinking it was a good opportunity to provide some local needs housing. Only we have provided local needs housing for others within the local parish in the last 15 years. Sites may be identified by your officers, but no one is offering to develop them. Our experience in building within the Peak Park delivers quality properties that we are proud of. The issue seems to be the one tree that we wish to remove. Its sister tree just fell over around 4 years ago without any warning. Is the tree we wish to remove worthy enough to deprive the village of gaining 3 affordable dwellings? The scheme is designed to work around the other trees on the site with the use of raft foundations to not destroy roots, as with the drains which will run towards Hardy Lane away from any roots. We have maximised the potential from the site, applying for 3 houses so as to reduce the need to use other open spaces to meet the need for affordable dwellings. Why not get 3 houses on the site if they will fit, especially as all of the parking and amenity criteria can be met? Sherwood Road already has a higgledy-piggledy street scene, with houses and bungalows sat face on, set back or side facing to the street. The Grade 2 listed building to the side of the site is barely visible from Sherwood Road or Hardy Lane, as it is tucked around a corner. Our scheme has considered the other properties around it, ensuring that ours are not overbearing or intrusive. The gable widths are in keeping with others in the area, and the wider mentioned ones are not visible from Sherwood Road. The lack of green provisions is mentioned, but this is because applications by others have been told to remove them from their applications as they are deemed inappropriate for the area. The houses will use the most efficient boilers, be super insulated and will use immediately local materials, thus reducing the carbon footprint of the build and the properties themselves. To summarise, we are offering to provide 3 local needs houses meeting all planning criteria, sited away from the existing trees that will bring an unloved site into the ownership of 3 local families who will care for and nurture it. If the site is left, it will continue to degenerate, the trees will die or fall over, and a gain will be missed for the people of Tideswell. Thank you. I have lived close to this.
So thank you to Mr. Hopkins for that presentation. Now over to members for any questions and comments, please. So can I ask William Armitage to start, and I've also got Patrick. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Chair. I've looked at this, and these TPOs, they are important and they should be adhered to. We've looked at it. The root protection areas should be adhered to. These are so often, they're not, people don't bother doing anything about it. Doesn't matter what they say, they just go on with diggers and one thing and another, and they'll kill the trees by foul means or fair, just by running over the roots. They've got the canopies going all the way across on some of the site, and the root protection, well, the roots of these go underneath the canopies for the same sort of distance, but this is average only, and there could be much bit longer roots going in there. As regards taking the lime tree out, I think it's absolutely ridiculous. And the trees, okay, they want the affordable housing, but as far as I'm concerned, the trees are more important. They've been there a lot longer than any houses or anything, and it goes against policy DMC 13, GSP 1 to 3 and L1. And as far as I'm concerned, I move to go with officer's recommendation to refuse this application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, William, for that. I've got Patrick next, but I've also noted I've got Mike Chaplin and David Chapman wanting to speak. Thank you. So, Patrick.
Yeah. Yes, thank you, Chairman. The report mentions the availability, the fact that a site for affordable housing, it has been earmarked somewhere in Tideswell. I think we need to be very careful about that statement, because really a site for affordable housing is only available or is only realistic if, first of all, there's a planning permission being granted, and secondly, the owner is realistically going to make it available. And I don't think there's any evidence of either of those two at the moment. And I can't resist reminding myself that I think it was 5 or 6 years ago, and I'm not even sure that it wasn't the same applicant. We approved 2 affordable houses on the edge of Lytton that happened to be within Tideswell parish. And the argument, exactly the same argument, was put at the time. Oh, yes, we've earmarked a site that would provide affordable housing. We're now 6 years on. That earmarked site is still not available. That says something either about our policies or about the housing authority's policies, and I don't know which one it is. Having said which, in this particular case, and I've been to see the site, I just do not think this is the right development for this site. It is a site that needs some better care and attention. In the interest of the conservation area, it's a pretty tatty site. The garages are in a very poor state. Apart from the trees, it does nothing to enhance the conservation area or the national park. But this development is not the right development for it. I'm sure that a development of some sort would be possible, and in the process, a very considerable enhancement would occur, but not this one. I'm not convinced about the setting of the listed building argument, but taking the whole thing together, I'm happy to second William's motion that this be refused.
I've just muted myself. Sorry. Thanks for that, Patrick. Mike Chaplin, please.
Yes, I can see that this has come to the Peak Park, or a number of applications have come to the Peak Park Planning Committee in the past. My question is really, is there a proposal that would be acceptable to planning officers that would fit in with our policies and criteria? Yeah.
Thank you, Mike. I'll move straight on to David Chapman. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Well, the validity of this application was immediately put into question by me when the misidentification of an elm tree and a lime tree were in the report. I mean, I don't think there's anybody present here today wouldn't be able to spot that difference just by walking past the site. So that immediately throws the applicant's survey into doubt. I think we can see from the photograph that John Keeley showed at the beginning of the debris on top of the garages from the trees which would be existing or remaining, and that's, as the report states, that would cause problems for the people whose house happens to be there. So I'm in support of offering a recommendation for this application.
Thank you, David. Any further comments or questions from any members? I've not missed anybody. Thank you. So the motion has been proposed and seconded. So we have recommendations that have been amended. Are we all happy with those amendments? Just nod if you need them. Right, we're fine with those. Thank you. So we'll move over now to Hannah for the vote, please.
Thank you, Chair. So if I'm just going to read everybody's names out, if you could let me know if you're voting for, against, or abstaining refusal of this item, please. Councillor Armitage.
For.
Councillor Brady. Councillor Chaplin.
For.
Councillor Chapman.
For.
Ms Harlin.
For.
Mr Helliwell.
For.
Councillor Huddlestone.
For.
Councillor Mrs Potter.
For.
Councillor Richardson.
For.
Miss Slack, and Mr. Smith.
4.
That's you, Miss Chair. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Hannah. So we will now move on then to item 5, which is a full application for proposed subterranean outbuildings in the rear garden at the Mount Bradwell. And this is again is a site that the Vice Chair and myself visited yesterday. And John Keeley is going to take us through this one again, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I hope everybody can hear me okay this time. This is the application site. It lies within the main body of the village of Bradwell and within the Bradwell Conservation Area. Application site area outlined in red there. It fronts onto the green, and we'll see in the photographs in a moment. It's one of a number of villa-style properties which stand in a very prominent location on the hillside in this part of Bradwell. The garden to the west of this house is stepped down quite considerably to a lower lawn level. And there's a flight of steps down there to get to that point. The house is therefore, because of the slope, it's 2-storey on the eastern side facing onto the green there, but at the rear it's actually 3-storey. And this proposal concerns some extensions at that lower level, which we'll see in a moment. So if we go to the next slide, please. So this is a more detailed layout. You can see the footprint of the house in grey there, and at the rear, on the left-hand side of that house, there's a raised terrace area and steps down to the lower lawn area to the left-hand side of the slide. It's bounded by dry stone walls, and then beyond those dry stone walls, there's a steeper drop down to the surrounding properties. If you have the next slide, please. So the proposal is to extend at the lower level to create a larger terrace there. You can see the area to the left of the grey area there. So you've a larger terrace area, and the steps would be rebuilt to get down to the lower lawn area from the new terrace. And beneath that terrace, there would be 2 rooms created in the undercroft, I'll call it, and they would open out onto the garden. One would provide some storage and workshop space for the owner. The other would be a workroom, storage room, essentially all ancillary purposes to the use of the house as a single private dwelling. When it was first applied for, you'll see some reference in the report, some of the representations about parking space. They did propose initially to create a parking space on the frontage, but that has been omitted from the proposal, just for clarity. Next slide, please. And this is just showing the lower ground area, the 2 rooms underneath the terrace. Next slide, please. So this is the property. You can see it's a very fine property. This is the elevation facing onto the green, limestone frontage, rendered to the side and the rear. And we'll see it has been extended at the rear with permission, and that work is ongoing. As part of the new owners of this property's refurbishment, extension, and bringing it up to a good standard. So if I have the next slide, please. This is the rear. You can see the extensions to the main body of the house there. They will be rendered to match the rest as the final part of the works. You can see also the steps, quite rickety at the moment, down to the lawn area. And the banking, which would be cut back to create the 2 rooms. Next slide. This just pans right a little bit to show you the relationship to the adjoining house, and where the levels step up again, going further up the hills. And there's an exposed area of rock face on that side of the garden. To give you an idea of the height, if you look at the steps towards the left-hand side, the new terrace will be about a couple of steps down from the current flight of steps. So that would be the level of the new terrace. Next slide, please. So this is looking across the current area at the back of the house down to the lower lawn area. And you can see the boundary wall there. And just beyond that boundary wall, the roofs of the houses at the lower level, which are down by the road, the main road that goes out of Bradwell up towards Tideswell. And the next slide, please. And this is taken from the bottom of the steps, looking north towards the adjoining property. Just behind that wall at a lower level, there is a public right-of-way, but you wouldn't be able to see over that into the garden. Next slide, please. Now, this is a slide taken further back from across the main road. So that's in the foreground, that's the main road which leads from Bradwell. If you went in the right direction there, up towards Tideswell. And the property concerned is in the left-hand slide, the upper left-hand side of the slide there. So you can just see the extension and the ground floor rooms there. So from this point, you wouldn't see the actual undercroft rooms in this proposal. You would just see the tops of the railings which are proposed to bound the terrace. Next slide, please. And this is just zoomed in a little closer to show you the setting, the immediate setting. Obviously, it's work underway, and when the house is rendered, it would significantly improve its appearance and finish the work off. Next slide, please. Oh, that's no change to the front elevation, so we can move quickly on to the next one. That's the current rear, and you can see the contrast of the front. 3 stories at the rear, 2 stories at the front. So it's below that current elevation we look now is where the proposed garden rooms would be. So next slide, please. And this is the proposed elevation. The applicant has worked very well with us during the application process. They've amended their plans in response to both our comments and the comments of the Parish Council. And we noted that, like us, the Parish Council were concerned about having a glazed balustrade. So the applicants have agreed to replace that with painted metal railings, which will be lighter weight and not be so obvious in the wider landscape. And they've also struck a balance between the scale of the openings into the rooms below with the size, and introduced some subdivision so it reflects the fenestration that sits above, albeit this would be very much a private garden view. It is fair to say that the bottom half would be visible from some areas of the village, but the distance would be such that it wouldn't be read as being particularly obvious in your viewpoint. And if you were to look at it and pick it out, it would nevertheless look appropriate in terms of the matching the fenestration, matching the natural limestone walls in the area, and had dark painted railings, so it wouldn't be prominent or intrusive in the conservation area. Next slide, please. This just shows the existing side elevation from the footpath direction, and the next slide showing the extent of the terraced area, the rooms underneath, and the next slide, and just a section showing through the site, and the final slide, I think, or if that was not the final one. Yeah. So in summary, the application has been significantly amended since it was submitted to take account of our concerns and the Parish Council concerns as much as possible. We consider it represents a modest form of development in matching materials and design, which respects the character of its surroundings, wouldn't harm the conservation area, and would not have any amenity impacts on neighbouring properties. And so for those reasons, Chair, we have recommended approval subject to the conditions in the report. Thank you.
Thanks, John. There is no public participation on this, no speakers, so we're over straight to members for their comments and questions, please. Seems to be very little coming forward. So Ken and David Chapman. Ken first, please.
Thanks, Chair. Just in the absence of any other comments for the moment, having visited the site yesterday, I'd just like to endorse the comments that John Keeley has made. I mean, certainly we stood across the road and it would, from road level, it's almost it is impossible to see this extension. apart from the railings if one has very good eyesight. And similarly, views are from further across the dale. I think when completed, it may well be that elements of it will be visible, but it will appear as part of that rear elevation with consistent fenestration. I don't think you'll even be able to from the hundreds of meters away across the dale. I think that cooperation that
Can you keep freezing? I'm afraid. I don't think you hear me. Thank you.
okay. Am I back again, Chair?
Ken, I think maybe you need to
Sorry.
turn your video off.
Yeah, okay. Am I here again? Can you
That
hear
sounds
me?
clear
Okay,
now.
thanks,
Yeah.
Annabelle.
Thank you.
Right. I'm just going to say that I don't believe it's going to be intrusive within Bradwell, and I'm happy to move the recommendation.
Thank you, Ken. David Chapman, please.
Thanks, Chair. I'll second Ken's move. I drive past this site lots of times. In fact, I'll be driving past in about 2 hours' time, and it won't be visible. In fact, anything that happens looking at the plans and the existing condition, it can do nothing but be an improvement. So I'm happy to second that.
Thank you, David. Any further comments or questions? Annabelle.
Just in agreement with other members, just noted that the parish council had raised a question about overdevelopment and if they have been given some feedback on that.
Thank you, Annabelle. John, would you like to just comment on that?
Yes, I think overdevelopment is a word that's often put forward in representations, and it's a difficult one. You have to look behind that as to how the development impacts on the site in terms of physical arrangements, etc. I don't believe this is overdevelopment. There's plenty of room for it. It actually tidies up an existing sort of area of banking of rubble, leaves plenty of room for amenity for the users of the house. So in terms of overdevelopment, I don't accept that argument. I am in regular contact with the chair of the Parish Council of Bradwell. We have a good working relationship, and this is probably one of the things that it'd be useful to give him a ring and talk through and explain our views, how we reach that, and make sure we have got that good understanding of where we each are. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, could I just add to that?
Yes, Jane. Sorry.
Just to say that we don't routinely respond to consultation responses from parishes. If you think we make about 1,000 planning decisions a year, it's just not viable to get back in touch with parish councils who respond to applications. But we do have Parishes Day. We also offer training for parishes in relation to making planning decisions. And we do sort of on occasion, on a sort of ad hoc basis, attend parish meetings, and Bradwell Parish Council is a really active parish council, so we do engage with them because they engage with us, quite honestly. But the point about overdevelopment, overdevelopment is it's a broad term, but I would say generally your biggest clue as to when there's overdevelopment is when the form that results is something that's unacceptable, when it looks like you're just trying to get too much onto a site. Essentially, that's what overdevelopment tends to be. So when you're covering sort of 80% of a garden, or when you've got really unusual roof structures, or just something very bulky. So the form that results, I think, is the biggest clue to overdevelopment generally. And in this case, we think the form is acceptable, and we don't think that it is overdevelopment in this case.
Yes, excuse me, Chair.
I wonder if
I could add something soon, Chair. John Scott here. I think maybe a few members in particular, it's perhaps worth knowing that about 7 or 8 years ago, we introduced something which we think helps with our relationship with parishes. It became obvious that parishes they weren't aware of what was going to planning committee. Often things were on the agenda because of their views, but I was often hearing I've often heard people say, but you don't take our views into account. And we explained that through our standing orders, we often take things to committee purely because of the parish council view, as is the case here. So what we did was we introduced a procedure about 7 or 8 years ago, it'd be, where after the agenda has been produced, we email the clerk to the parish council with a link to say, here's an item that's on the agenda next Friday. Please look at the report. If you want to speak, please do. You're welcome to speak. And it's a heads up to the parish. It's on the agenda, and it's often on the agenda because of them. I've often been surprised how few parishes actually take up the offer to come and speak on the back of that, but at least they know it's on the agenda, and if they want it, and they can see the officer response, because the report should deal with their views as well. Thank you, Chair.
Robert, you're muted.
I muted because I thought there was some interference. Sorry, I've got Kath and William wanting to speak, and I'll take Kath first.
Thank you, Chair. I am rather concerned because we've got an excellent conservation officer, and she makes 2 points that seem to have been dismissed. One is sympathetic to its historic character and appearance, and the other statement a negative aspect on the historic character and appearance of the Bradwell Conservation Area. I just feel that we have maybe ignored, unintentionally maybe, some valuable input here, and I don't think I can vote for it, but don't think I can vote against it. So I think I'm going to have to abstain because I have concerns that we're not fully appreciative of the work done on by the conservation officer in relation to this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Kath. Jane, and then I'll ask William for comment. Thank you.
I think I just wanted to reassure Kath about the Conservation Officer's comments, because if you look at it, it's paragraph 8 of your report. The concerns that are raised by the Conservation Officer about boundary walling, that element of the application has been withdrawn in relation to parking that was proposed at the front. So in terms of impacts on the conservation area by the removal of that wall, that's been addressed. So the wall and railings that are referred to there are the wall and railings at the front elevation that would have been removed for the parking. So then we go on to large areas of glazing and the glass balustrade on the rear elevation, which she raises concerns about, which the proposal has been amended to reduce the amount of glazing on the rear elevation and to remove the glass balustrade and replace it with railings. So the Conservation Officer's comments are entirely correct, but the application has been substantially amended to address those concerns through the course of the application, which is why it's now recommended for approval. I hope that's reassuring, Kath.
Thank you, Jane, for that clarification. William.
Thank you, Chair. Just on observation of this site, there's going to be a hell of a lot of soil removed, and it's going down well below, I would suggest, the current foundations of the house, and it'll well, I think you could end up with a lot falling down if they're not careful. But no doubt building regs will put them right on this and say how much concrete's got to be poured in and a revetment wall put in to stop this happening. And once it's in place, it would actually strengthen the current building and stop any subsidence. But it's a dangerous site to be working on, let's put it like that. And I wouldn't like to do anything on it. On the subject of the railings, well, I have a glazed area behind my house, and I think if you put railings on it, it would detract from the building. If it's glazed, you can't see, you can see straight through it, and you can see the actual stonework and everything. And if you put railings on, you know, okay, fair enough. That's your decision to put railings there. But having seen it in practice and got it on my own house, I don't think it's the right one, but I'll go along with you, and I will back anything that you do, and I'm in favour of this application.
Right, thank you, William. I mean, the glazed area has been removed now, so it's not actually in this planning application. And the comment about soil, it's actually, the house is actually not far off rock. So it's going to be a lot of rock, I think, that's going to need removing rather than soil. But we'll just go over to John for clarification on that, if that's possible. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think there will be some removal of material there. And I think, like you've said, Chair, there wouldn't be a huge amount. A lot has already been reused that's been dug out in rebuilding walls elsewhere within the property. It may well be prudent, though, just to make sure that potentially having an additional condition saying to make sure that any spoil arising from the development, excess spoil, is disposed of via a licensed waste operator rather than just being disposed of elsewhere in the site. I think
John,
Jane has a different view.
Because a licensed waste operator, we're duplicating another regime. I think the better wording for the condition is probably a scheme for the disposal of waste, so that if there's any proposal to retain it on site, which would raise the level of the garden, that might be a cause for concern. So I think what we want is just an additional condition which sets out that they submit a scheme telling us what they do with the spoil arising.
Yeah, should. Yeah,
Sorry,
should.
John.
Yeah. No, I think that's fine. That's very practical and common sense approach. Thank you, Jane.
So can I just ask Ken and David if they're happy with that amendment to recommendations? Thank you. Thank you very much. So we have a motion which has been proposed to accept the recommendation. So we'll hand over to Hannah for the vote, please.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll just read out each member's name. If you could let me know if you're voting for, against, or abstaining from approval of this item, please. Councillor Armitage.
For.
Councillor Brady.
For.
Councillor Chaplin.
For.
Councillor Chapman.
For.
Ms Harlin.
For.
Mr Helliwell.
For.
Councillor Huddlestone.
For.
Councillor Mrs Potter.
Abstain.
Councillor Richardson.
For.
Miss Slack.
For.
And Mr Smith.
For.
Votes carried, Chair, with 10 for and 1 abstain. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. We've got item 6 coming up shortly, so I think it's a good opportunity to take 10 minutes break. So if we could be back for 11:05, please. Yes, remember just to stop your videos and just mute yourselves. Right, I think we're getting everybody back, are we? Mike Chaplin. Reg, Ken. Just wondering if Mike Chaplin is with us. Mike, are you there? Give him a couple of minutes. Can I just check? Have we got Mike and Annabelle? We've got Mike, thank you. Yes, it's just Annabelle. I was wondering if Annabelle was with us. Now, could I ask Ian just to mute his mic, please?
Yeah, will do.
Thank you. Right, so item 6 then is the offer of Section 106 agreement in relation to enforcement action against the creation of a surface track on land at Mickledon Edge, Middup Moor, Bradfield. And John Scott is going to take us through this. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Chair.
Mike, could you just mute your mic, please? Thank you.
Okay, great, thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody.
Can I just, John, before you start, your microphone has terrible interference. Do you have another headset available? You're muted, John.
Yeah, had you got it earlier when I was talking? Is that any better if I move it slightly? How's that?
There's loads of white noise. Is it just me, or is everybody hearing that?
No, I've had the problem before. I did message to Alden House to say, but it wasn't any better just then, John, unfortunately.
Oh, okay. I think, well, I could go and find another headset, but this headset's usually quite good, so I'd be surprised if that's the problem. Okay, I think it's best. I don't think moving is the answer either, is it? If it's up there, is it any better? No. Okay. Let's see what happens if it's not in at all. Don't think this will work. Let's just. What's that the answer? Okay. Right, I suspect this is not going to make it any better. Let's just again. If that doesn't help, Jane, I'm thinking either I continue, or is it something that you'd like to introduce?
John, that is a lot better. I don't know what you've done to it, but it's a lot better.
Oh, okay, right.
It's not just that I don't want to present that, it's genuinely.
No, not at all. No, it's interesting. I hadn't realised because this has been quite good. Okay, that's good, thank you. I just unplugged it and plugged it. Yeah, always the answer with technology. Okay, anyway, good morning. And I'll introduce this. In some ways, it might seem like quite a complex matter, but I think the report is fairly straightforward. So we just brought me another headset just in case. Yeah, so as you'll see in the report, we're bringing it to you for two reasons. We have the offer of a Section 106 obligation. Obligation is often used rather than agreement in this case. We're bringing it to members for two reasons. Firstly, it's a matter which has raised significant concerns in the past, so we think it's important you're aware of this. And also, we don't think officers have the right understanding orders to agree Section 106s. Well, there's no application associated with it, as is the case here. And we're bringing it to you now because it's in respect of an enforcement notice, which is subject to an appeal. And at the moment, the appeal, which will be dealt with by public inquiry, is scheduled to begin on the 8th of December. So officers are now having to work on their proofs of evidence. It's public inquiry that's been set for December the 8th. The anticipation is it will be several days. We think maybe 2. The appellant is thinking slightly longer, but it will involve a site visit as well. So it's probably quite a significant time commitment. The appeal was actually submitted in November 2018, and it's been with the planning inspectorate since then. So if you wonder why this is with us now, when this was at planning committee 2 years ago, it's because it's been with the planning inspectorate for an unusually long amount of time. In the report, you'll see we don't actually deal with the track in any great detail itself, because that's in the appendix, and we didn't want to repeat all the background to the case, which is in the planning officer's report from 2018. In the appendices, you'll also see the enforcement notice that was served in October 2018. And as I've said, the appeal is in respect of that. And again, you may have heard this at planning training, but if we have an enforcement notice and the person receiving that notice submits an appeal, the notice goes into abeyance. So in effect, for the past 2 years, it's been in abeyance and we've not been able to do anything about it, which is one of the unfortunate consequences of appeals against enforcement notices. Over the past few months, we have been talking to the applicant's agent, the appellant's agent. As is required, the planning inspectorate expects us to engage. So if we can resolve things between us, if we can resolve it in its entirety, fine. If we can't resolve everything, we need to agree what the common ground is between us. So it's entirely normal that planning authorities engage with appellants in cases like this. And over those few months, the applicant, the appellant's situation or his offer has changed. Initially, it was a request for us to withdraw the enforcement notice, which we didn't accept. Obviously, it's not acceptable for us to withdraw the enforcement notice because the track would then become lawful. So in the face of our rejection of that, the appellant has looked at it again, and we've had offers which are to withdraw the appeal. Now, if you withdraw the appeal, that's quite a significant offer, because if you withdraw the appeal, the instant effect is that the notice comes back into effect, and the clock starts ticking. So an offer to withdraw an appeal is really quite significant because on the face of it, it achieves the outcome we're after. Now, obviously, the applicant is only prepared to withdraw the appeal in return for something else in this case. And the something else is what they're offering in the Section 106 obligation. In the report, you'll see what the effect of it is. If you go to Section 2 in the report, if you were to have that in front of you, the main elements are that the appellant would withdraw the appeal. As I've just said, the notice then comes into effect. Both parties would agree not to claim costs, and as it's going to be a public inquiry, they could be quite significant. You don't automatically get costs if you succeed in the appeal, and we think we've got a good case for defending any application for costs against us. But the agreement would have a clause wherein neither we nor the appellant would claim costs. The appellant's agent says the offer would be beneficial to both parties because the cost could be high. And it also gives greater certainty to the authority because the withdrawal of the appeal means, as you've heard, the notice comes into effect. In return for this, we would be obliged to amend the enforcement notice. The main thing in there is that we would be asked to accept the track for a longer period than is the case in the notice. I'll have to come back to that to explain that because it's not quite as straightforward as that. It would also mean that, well, the appellant would also offer to restrict the use of the track in the period it would remain to no more than 50 days a year and to vehicles under a certain weight. And it's a restriction which isn't in the notice at present. We haven't given great weight to that because we don't know what the significance of 50 days is or what that vehicle weight is. It may well be that's just what the appellant's using it for at the moment anyway. So in a sense, it's not a meaningful offer. We haven't given great weight to it. The other thing in the agreement is it would allow us to engage with the appellant on how to restore the track, how to restore the route of the track in the event it's removed. At the moment, we have to do that in a prescriptive way through an enforcement notice, and that can be quite difficult. An enforcement notice can only require the unauthorised things to be undone. We can't achieve any betterment through an enforcement notice. That's often quite difficult. So in the agreement, we would have an opportunity to engage with the appellant in a more positive way to get proper restoration of the track. Finally, and perhaps most
John,
importantly,
I think it's clear that the enforcement notice does allow proper restoration of the track. It's that we could use this as an opportunity to achieve enhancement.
Yeah. Yes, thank you, Jane. That's important. Thank you for that. Yeah. Finally, and importantly, perhaps most importantly, because it's the main sticking point at the moment, is the draft Section 106 obligation includes a clause that would have the effect of requiring us to waive something we're allowed to do under the Planning Act. If you look at the final bullet point on 2.2, under Section 70C of the Town and Country Planning Act, we can refuse to entertain an application, refuse to determine an application where there's an outstanding enforcement notice. So in this case, if the appellant withdraws the appeal and the notice comes into effect, it would mean they can't make a future an application in the future to retain it because there's an enforcement notice in place. Or they can make
it would mean that
yeah.
we would have a choice about
Sorry.
whether we dealt with it at that point in the future, and depending on the situation that we were in the future, we could take into account the various scenarios that we might be in then, and we could make a decision at that point based on the situation that we were in as an authority.
Yeah, I've been trying to simplify it. In effect, if an applicant wants to put an application in at a future date when there's an enforcement notice in place, we have the discretion. We can refuse to determine it. It's entirely discretionary. If we want to determine it, we can, and we can make whatever decision we wish. If we do determine it, it gives the applicant a right of appeal. That's the key thing. If we exercise a power that's available under Section 70C, we could just refuse to entertain that application at some future date, in which case the applicant has no right of appeal. And the only way they can challenge that would be through a form, well, it has to be a legal challenge through judicial review. We've got Reg Cooper on the call today, so he can explain more about that if you wish. So in effect, the applicant wants us to waive that clause. And as you'll see in the recommendation, we're recommending that we accept this. Clause is removed. If not removed, our advice is that we should not. In fact, we could have not removed it. It would fetter our discretion at a future date, and we shouldn't do that. So that's the main sticking point. The other parts of it, we think we can accept. The period which they're now asking for, the extended period, has been reduced. Initially, they asked for a 42-month extension, and then 36, and they're now asking for 28. Whereas in the enforcement notice, it's within 12 months. I think the other thing which you need to bear in mind, and then I'll take you through the slides, is the dates aren't as straightforward as they sound. In the enforcement notice, it's quite clear. When the notice comes into effect, certain things have to be done within a certain time scale. But it's important how we compare the starting point of that. As I was saying earlier, the clock will only start to tick in the event the appeal is dismissed. and the enforcement notice comes into place. If the inquiry goes ahead in December, we can expect a decision optimistically in the first quarter of next year. And if the inspector upholds the appeal, dismisses the appeal and upholds the notice, at that point the clock would start to tick. And assuming the inspector doesn't change anything in the notice, which the inspector could do, it will start to tick, and there'll be 12 months to do certain works, but they're also time limited or constrained by things like the bird breeding season. What the appellant, if I can perhaps try and be clear there, is offering is that if we have an agreement now, the appeal would be withdrawn and the clock would start to tick straight away on the enforcement notice. So it would happen sooner, potentially 3 or 4 months sooner, potentially. So the period the appellant is asking for isn't perhaps quite as long as it would seem, because the clock would start to tick sooner. So it's important you bear that in mind. And most importantly, it gives us certainty, because the outcome we want on this is we want to win the appeal if we have an appeal. The effect of the appeal being withdrawn is essentially the same, with the exception of two things. One, it means the trap may be in place for some time longer. And secondly, as is on offer at the moment, they want us to waive our rights to refuse to entertain a future application. And as you've heard, we can't accept that. In every other respect, we think acceptance of this obligation is in the public interest. It's not a weakening of our position. I think you'll hear that from some of the speakers. This is about us achieving the outcome we want, which is for the notice to be in place and for the track to be removed. I'll stop there and we'll go through the slides. There's about half a dozen or so slides. So the slide on screen at the moment shows the track from the other side of the valley, and you can see that line, the route going up through the vegetation from the bottom left to the top right. It actually starts on the side of the valley from which the photograph is taken. It drops down across the beck and out of the other side. So next slide, please. And again, you can see it there from within that valley, and you can see it again from the bottom left to the top right, and you can see that green swathe off to the top right. Next slide, please. Here's a close-up. What you'll see on the close-ups is some bits which are entirely unacceptable, and you can see that we think this gives our positions I think some strength, and we should be confident about it. You can see it's plastic matting. It was only put down initially, as the report you've got in the appendix says, it was only put down to facilitate some conservation works. It was supported by and partly paid for Natural England. So it was entirely for conservation purposes and was never meant to be permanent. That probably explains why the track isn't wearing very well. It wasn't ever meant to be a permanent solution. It's plastic, it's become very brittle in places. And in some places it's broken up so badly they put log rafts over the top, which is what you're seeing here. Okay, next slide, please. And again, in some places it's broken down so badly it has that effect. But you can see within a few yards of it, and you'll see this I think on the next slide, in places where it has been stable and isn't too wet, the grass has grown through. So the track itself is not so obvious, although the grass swathe is. So next slide, please. So in places where it hasn't been under pressure, often because the ground was quite level and it was well drained, you can see the grass has grown through it. But it's important to note the appeal is against the whole of the track. Well, the enforcement notice is in respect of the whole of the track, and the appeal is against that. So you can see from the earlier slides that any case that the track is acceptable, we think they've got a very strong case against. So next slide, please. Another example of where in sections it's become white, it's become well hidden, but this isn't over the whole route, and it contains this plastic out there, which is breaking up and becoming an issue with litter, actually. Next slide, please. This bit is where it crosses the cut gate path, which is a heavily used footpath out of the valley up onto the top of the moors, and a bridleway as well. And you can see here, it used to cut across it, and they cut through it. It's very steep, and we've had, and I think you'll hear this later too, we've had reports of it being slippery. I've experienced myself, it can be very slippy when it's wet. So it comes down off the hill, and it continues on the other side of the track, bottom left of the photograph. Next slide, please. Or is that it? Oh, no, one more. And again, you can see a section there where it's essentially a grassy track now, which has been reinforced with plastic. But as you've seen, that's not typical of the rest of it. And in the valley bottom, you can see where it's very wet. They put log rafts in. These are also unauthorised. Good. That's it, thank you. I think that's the last slide. I don't think there's any more. Just check. No more slides? That's it, thank you. If you'd like to leave that last one up, I think that would be helpful. Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, John. We've got several speakers or several representations on this. So we'll hand over to Alden House for the first one, which is a Mr. Milinkovic. That should be a statement read out by Karen, I believe. Thank you.
That were unanimously refused at Planning Committee, MPS 1217-1304 on the 15th of June 2018. This proposal has not been subject to consultation or scrutiny. There were over 3.
Can I just stop you, please? Can we just turn the volume up at your end?
Friends of the Peak.
I'm on full volume. A job to hear you.
Yeah, Karen's just looking into it now, Chair. Statement from Simon Rippon.
This is a statement from Milo Milinkovic. Given the controversial issues that were unanimously refused at Planning Committee, MP/1217/1304 on the 15th of June 2018, this proposal has not been subject to consultation or scrutiny. There were over 300 objections, including BMC, RSPB, Friends of the Peak District, representing the public. The landowner is attempting to coerce the Peak District National Park Authority into accepting an agreement which allows the illegal track to remain and allow a further application at this time. The proposed 28-month compliance period is unacceptable. This would allow the track to deteriorate even further. The agreement is flawed as the potential for a change in legislation and staff changes at the PDMPA means a further application at a later date outside of the agreement with PDMPA would have to be considered. Allowing the track to remain weakens the authority's position in this instance and in other similar cases that are growing in number. The spread of illegal tracks has to be both challenged and stopped. It is underwritten by the promises it would avoid the high cost of a public inquiry and the possibility of costs being awarded against each party. However, in paragraph 3.1, the appellant's agent makes it clear they intend to seek costs. The issues of uncertainty about the outcomes of an appeal are insufficient reason to capitulate after the time and cost that has already been spent, much of it due to manipulation of the system by the landowner. He has pushed the boundaries at every opportunity and some of his methods are questionable. The PDMPA should not allow this matter to drag on any further, nor for it to be kicked metaphorically into the long grass. This damages the reputation of the Peak Park. It is quite clear that the development of the track is contrary to the principles of development in the natural zone and the PDMPA key strategic policy principles. One may question whether there is sufficient tenacity from the officers to be effective. In pressing ahead at short notice, this agreement falls short of independent scrutiny, thereby facilitating the appellant's circumvention of the appeal process. In asking the Planning Committee to endorse this recommendation, the officers are reneging in their professional responsibility and accountability. That cannot be right. The appeal hearing allows for all parties' points of view to be considered and for an independent decision that seeks justice prevail. Please refuse this agreement.
Thank you, Karen. That was loud and clear. So we'll move on to the second one, which is Simon Rippon.
Statement is from Simon Rippon. Given the controversial issues that we unanimously refused at Planning Committee MP/S/1217/134 on the 15th of June 2018, this Section 106 proposal has not been subject to consultation or scrutiny and lacks public transparency. You will recall that the previous applications for permission attracted a large lobby of public opinion against the application. Indeed, there were over 300 objections, including BMC, RSPB, Friends of the Peak representing the public, made to committee in June 2018. This whole episode has proven to be extremely protracted and has lacked authoritative action and enforcement by the PDMP. The proposed 28-month compliance period is unacceptable, as are other details in the notice. This notice would allow the track to deteriorate even further and to remain in use. The agreement also is flawed, as the potential for a change in legislation and staff changes at the PDMPA means a further application at a later date outside of the agreement with PDMPA would have to be considered. I believe that allowing the track to remain weakens the authorities' position in this instance and in other similar and future cases that are growing in number across the Peak District moorland areas. The spread of illegal tracks has to be both challenged and stopped, and the PDMPA needs to act in accordance with its own corporate statements and policies on such matters in order to maintain the landscape and public trust. The Section 106 is underwritten by the promises it would avoid the high cost of a public inquiry and the possibility of costs being awarded against each party. However, in para 3.1, the appellant's agent makes it quite clear they intend to seek costs. The issues of uncertainty about the outcomes of an appeal are insufficient reason to capitulate after the time and cost that has already been spent and the protracted tactics of the landowner. The PDMPA should not allow this matter to go on any further and needs to be seen to be enacting the decision of the Planning Committee and the enforcement notice. Failure to do so damages the reputation of the Peak Park Authority and its procedures and strategy. It is quite clear that the development of the track is contrary to the principles of the development of the natural zone and the PDMPA key strategic policy principles. This has been noted and documented elsewhere. If this Section 106 notice is agreed and accepted, the public rightly should question whether there is sufficient tenacity from the officers to be effective and whether the PDMPA has any authority and jurisdiction to act on a future development. In pressing ahead at short notice, this agreement falls short of independent scrutiny, therefore facilitating the appellant's circumvention of the appeal process. Have you got Tomos?
Yeah, thank you for that, Karen. The next one is from Mr. Thompson, and again to be read out. Thank you.
This is a statement from Tomo Thompson. CPREPD and SY are strongly opposed to avoiding or delaying the imminent public inquiry. It will disenfranchise the reasonable aims of the numerous concerned members of the public and also seek to undermine the legitimate actions of the planning authority to date. The authority needs to hold its nerve, uphold